full-time, first-time, such as yourselves, and all transfer students, over the course of this weekend, and actually for transfer students the first 2 weeks of the semester, attend a workshop on gender. And my colleague, Dr. Shelley Germaner, who's the Assistant Provost for Student Success, and I divide up all the lectures. So between the two of us, we get to speak to all of the incoming students, both first year as well as transfer. And we do this 45-minute, I almost said an hour lecture, and that would get you nervous. It's only 45 minutes. Lecture on gender. And this is something we've been doing for about 3 or 4 years. And we think it's really an important topic, and I'll share with you why we think that is. So Stony Brook is a member of UN Women's He for She campaign for gender equality. That symbol in the middle is the symbol of the He for She campaign. The He for She campaign was started in 2014 at the United Nations to improve gender equality for all people all across the world. And one of the things they wanted to do, in addition to the broad stroke improving gender equality for all people across the world, was to involve men in working for gender equality for all people. And so they started a campaign, I just said this, they started a campaign called Impact 10 by 10 by 10. And so what they did was select 10 countries in the world, 10 corporations in the world, and then 10 universities. And you can see up here the list of what those 10 universities are. There were only, and many applied. There were only 2 universities in the United States selected, Georgetown and Stony Brook. And then some really leading universities globally around the world on virtually every continent. And we're really proud to be a part of this movement. President Stanley is what's called an impact champion. So he's the leader of our efforts. And we have really dedicated ourselves as a university to work toward achieving gender equality for all people, to ensure that everybody in our institution can be their true selves and can achieve everything that they're capable of achieving. So we then, the first year out, hosted a meeting right here on our campus of people from all 10 universities around the world, bringing them to Stony Brook to talk about what we're going to do, what our commitments are, what all of our commitments are, and specifically what we're doing here at Stony Brook. One of the things that we committed to do back in 2014 as part of our becoming a member of this group was that we would create and then deliver these seminars for all incoming students starting that fall and fall and spring, and then move forward, and this is a part of that program. So we're going to talk about gender. I think it's really important for us to go through some material that to some of you may seem rather basic, to others of you not so much. And so it's important that we all have a shared learning experience, that when we use certain words that we understand what they mean. And so I'm going to go through a number of slides talking about what these things mean so that we can develop a shared lexicon, so that we can develop a shared vocabulary, and then go into some of the issues around gender and how they impact all of us. One of the things that I know, and we know from the research and the work that we do, is that often when you mention gender, many men don't think of themselves as being impacted by gender. But in fact, all people are impacted by gender. And so that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about and get through during the presentation. So gender starts really early. So when you hear that somebody is expecting a baby, or you hear that somebody has had a baby, often the very first question that's asked is it a boy or is it a girl? And then you go shopping, and when you go into a store and try to buy clothes for a baby, and I've had this experience with my own children and more recently with my grandchildren, that as much as we talk about equality and change and what's happened, most of the clothes are still blue and pink. And really, it's very hard to find pastel or things that babies of any gender could wear. So gender starts really early, and it's something that I think stays with us and impacts us throughout our lives. So when we talk about sex and we talk about gender, often we think of it as the same thing. We think they mean the same thing, and in fact they don't. If I said here, what is sex, most of you would raise your hand and say something that I would rather you not say. I thought more of you would laugh at that. Because I'm not looking for sex as a verb. I'm looking for what the differences are between sex and gender. So when we talk about sex, we're talking about biology. We're talking about physiology. So it has to do with our genitals. It has to do with our chromosomes. It has to do with our DNA. The characteristics that not always, but for the most part, we're born with. When we talk about gender, it's not biology. Gender is something that is a social construct. It's something that we as a society, and every different society, creates as to how we should act, how we should present ourselves, what kind of clothes we should wear, how we should wear our hair, the things we should do. It has nothing to do with biology. And I think that's a really important distinction that I think is necessary for us to hold on to as we go through this workshop, but also as we talk about gender. During your 101 seminars, whether it's the Honors College 101 or the ACH 101, there will be an additional lecture, additional program. It's not a lecture. It's more interactive. But there will be an additional session about gender. And so that will build upon some of the things that I am talking about today. So very foundational is the fact that sex and gender are two different things. One's talking about biology, and one is talking about a social construct. How do we get our sex? How is it decided? So for the most part, and again, this is not always the case, but in the vast, vast majority of cases, when a baby is born, someone in attendance at the birth, whether that be a medical person, a doctor, a nurse, a midwife, in places around the world where there is no medical person in attendance at the birth, somebody does a very cursory look at the baby, takes a scan of the baby's body, and says to the parents, pronounces that the baby is either a boy or a girl. Tells them that they have a son or a daughter. I just had the opportunity this summer to spend 2 weeks talking about gender across Africa. And so in Africa, it would be, because they don't use son or daughter, it would be a boy child or a girl child. And regardless of what it's called, regardless of where it is, it's all based upon somebody taking a look. Gender, on the other hand, is something that we pick up through society, either with direct messaging or indirect messaging. So what is a person's gender identity? Gender identity is what I truly believe inside, what I truly deeply feel is my identity. Theoretically, I'm the only one who knows what that is. The only way to truly know someone's gender identity is to actually ask them. And most of us don't do that, and if we do that, it needs to be done in a very sensitive way. Most of us don't talk about what our gender identity is. It's just something that we feel on the inside. Gender expression, on the other hand, is what we present to the world. Our external appearance, how we dress, how we carry ourselves, how we speak. And it's important to understand that what I express to the world may or may not be consistent with my gender identity. In many cases, it's all the same, but in many cases, it's not. And both of those, my gender identity and my gender expression, have nothing to do with my sexual orientation. So, whom I'm attracted to, who I want to be with, where I get my physical and emotional gratification, may or may not be aligned with my gender identity or my gender expression. It often is, but it's really important for us to understand as a community that there are many times that it's not. And everybody in our community, we believe, has the right to be their true selves, has a right to live out their lives in a way that is true and positive to themselves. And each of us commit to doing nothing to impinge on that, nothing to negatively interact with that. When we talk about gender, there are often some false assumptions that we make growing up, that we carry with us as adults. It's just things we think about. The first is, although all three are and they're numbered 1, that's really cool. I made the slides, so I'm only making fun of myself. It's okay. The first assumption that we make, and this is not true, and it's important for you to know that this is not true, is that gender is not binary. There's not just two. In fact, there's a continuum. And people find themselves at all different points along that continuum. So it ranges from, and it could be either direction, it doesn't matter, masculine to feminine, and then a whole line in between. I know everyone's fanning themselves, but that's fine. But it's incredibly hot up here too. And I don't know why people dress like I am. But. So gender is not binary. I think that's one of the assumptions that many people come in here thinking that there's just two. And in fact, there's a continuum. Google has attempted to quantify how many there are. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but there's just a lot. The important takeaway for you is to know that there's more than just two. And I'm using this word, and I don't like this word, but every one of them is as valid as every other one. I mean, it's not for us to judge anybody. But we need to be accepting of people anywhere along that continuum. Many of us believe or believed or grew up believing that it's pretty clear cut. Someone's masculine, feminine, a man, a woman, and it's pretty clear. The demarcation is pretty obvious and easy to know. And in fact, it's not. It's a very permeable boundary that people can and do go back and forth with, depending on where they are in their lives, where their identity is, where their expression is. It's not static, that this is how someone was at 12 years old and this is how they are going to be for the rest of their lives. It changes. And again, everybody has the ability and the right to change it. And then finally, many of us have just thought, because we don't really think about these things that much, that our sex, our gender identity, and our gender expression are all in a neat row. They all line up very neatly. When in fact, sometimes they do, but many, many, many times they don't. When it does line up all in a row, then that's referred to as cisgender. It's just a word that's used to describe it when all of those things are aligned neatly in a row. So these are just, I'm not going to go through these. These are just some words that people use to describe different places along this continuum. You're going to go through a program around diversity, and a part of that program will be to talk about the fact that language matters. Words matter. So we need to be aware of that. We need to understand what the meaning of words are that we're using, what the context is, and be careful with that. I told you that gender is a social construct, and that's absolutely true. So what that means is that in different parts of the world, even in different parts of a single country, gender is viewed differently. And this is just a pictorial demonstration of the fact that in different parts of the world, people respond differently to gender. So if you were raised in the United States, or you were raised in Korea, or you were raised in China, or you were raised in any of the countries that we are lucky enough to have students from, the way you were raised and understand gender may be different than the way other people sitting in here understand gender. Because we get our beliefs very much as we're being raised, as we're developing in our cultures, in our places where we're growing up. So we talk about the social construct, and with the social construct comes certain beliefs. Now, some of you may think of these as stereotypes. And in some ways, some of them are. Some of them might have some good qualities to them, but not taken to the extreme. And some not so much at all. But these are words that when you ask people, what does it mean to be a man, or what does it mean to be a woman, people come up with. One of the things that I was so struck with this summer with some of the work I was doing was that, because I do a lot of this work here on campus, and so I spend time with students and do these exercises, and whether I was here on Long Island in New York State, or in Johannesburg, or in Botswana, or in London, asking the same question, we'd fill a poster sheet of paper with almost identical lists, some differences, but almost identical lists. So I think it's really interesting. So what are some of these things? Men should be strong. They should be tough. Did I get my tough voice on? Should be tough. Sounded like my 3-year-old grandson when I said that. They should have lots of girls. They should take risks. They should be self-confident. They should be the providers, the ones in control. They should be competitive. They should be self-reliant. And absolutely, they should be non-feminine. Be sure you understand that I'm not endorsing this list. But this is what many men, including many of the students who identify as men in this room, grow up believing, grow up being told. There's nothing wrong with being self-confident. There's nothing wrong with being self-reliant, with being strong. But it's the degree to which it controls your life. It's the degree to which you have to always model these behaviors, rather than being what I call a full-hearted person, a full range of emotions, a full range of feelings. Similarly, women grow up hearing things in their head. They should be softer. They need to be weaker, submissive, deferential, pretty and thin, nurturing, maternal, emotional and sensitive, sexually restrained. So the guys are supposed to be with lots of women, and the women are supposed to be sexually restrained. And they're supposed to be social. These two can be very damaging to women. Because women are self-reliant. Women are strong. All of those things that I listed before has nothing to do with gender. So we have to be careful, all of us, of two things around this. One, that we don't have to succumb to this notion. We don't have to live in a restricted way by these rules, so that we can all be allowed to be a whole person, not a gender box. That's what we have to remember for ourselves. The other thing that we have to remember is that we should not ever judge other people by the words on either of these slides. No one has given anyone in this room, and I obviously include myself, the position that we should be judging anybody. We need to be living our lives and accepting other people living their lives. The important thing for you to understand is that gender, regardless of what your gender identity is, gender has had an impact on your life. It's impacted your choices. It's impacted your opportunities. And unfortunately, in many ways, it's impacted how society sees you and the value that society places on you. Sometimes we know that this is happening, and often we don't know it's happening. There's a concept, and I don't have a slide for it, and I should, and I'm just going to step out of the slide deck for a minute and mention it, because I think it's important. Because we're complex people. Every one of us is a complex human being. Many things impact who we are. So different parts of us intersect with each other. It's a concept that we call intersectionality. So along with your gender and your gender identity and your gender expression, there are other factors that mix in there. So our level of education, our socioeconomic level, our race and ethnicity, the language that we speak, all of those are also part of this. So we need to understand where and how those pieces fit together. Right now we're talking about gender, but it truly is much more complex than that. I didn't say in the beginning, I'm a faculty member here. I've been a faculty member for 29 years. I'll be starting my 30th year this year. And I teach I have faculty appointments in the School of Social Welfare, which is over on East Campus. It's our social work program, and we have an undergraduate master's and doctoral program in social work. And I'm also a faculty member in our graduate program in public health. So those are the areas that I do my research in. That's what I do my work in. And much of my work for the last, way longer than I want to say, years, over 40 years, has been around issues of gender and gender-based violence and masculinity and issues related to that. So that's sort of my background and why I'm one of the two people that are presenting this material. So what I'd like you to think about, and I'm not going to ask you to respond, so this is just for you to consider. And I'd really like everybody to consider for a minute. How has gender impacted your life? If we could put away the phones for a little while, that would be really helpful. How has gender impacted your choices? How has it impacted your successes, your experiences? Do you think You may not have thought about it, but do you think that your gender impacted your decision about what major you're pursuing here at Stony Brook? Do you think that it impacted your life's plans, what you see ahead of you? And then finally, do you think that your gender identity and your gender expression has impacted the way others treat you? How they see you, how they treat you? I was just over in the Wang Center as transfer students were checking in, and there was lots of people. And I was standing with two people that were running that operation because I just wanted to check in and see how it was going. This was just literally 10 minutes before I came over here. And they were both wearing the Stony Brook red, 3-button shirts and looked official to me. And students kept coming over to ask for directions. Where's room so-and-so? How do I get to this? Which is, obviously we need to find our way. The majority of students that approached the three of us asked me the question because I was dressed like this. The two people standing on either side of me wearing the red pullovers were both women and actually knew much more about where the sessions were being held than I did. But they would see me standing there, see me wearing this, and assume they should ask me the question. So, whether directly or implied, it impacts how people see you, how they interact with you, what they're looking for. One of the ways that gender disparities play out is in the pay gap. So in virtually every field, equally qualified women and equally qualified men doing the same quality and quantity of work get paid different amounts. So think about the people that you know. For the students who identify as women in the audience, think about yourselves. Should you put in the same amount of work, get the same results, sometimes better results, and get paid less? Well, in this country and virtually everywhere in the world, that exists. So should your mother, should your sister, should people that you really care about, who are really good at what they do and work really, really hard, get paid less than men doing the same work? I think it's hard to make a defense of that. So we need to understand that and work to eliminate those gaps in all parts of the workforce, in all parts of, in all professions across the board. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but Serena Williams, who obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously. For those of you that don't know, is I think the best women's tennis player playing today and maybe of all time. She wrote an article in Fortune magazine talking about how people in women's sports get paid so much less than people in men's sports. And obviously she was coming at it through a tennis lens, professional tennis lens. And she'll be playing in the U.S. Open in Queens, which starts today. But it's in every sport, including a differential in college sports as well as professional sports. The whole Title IX movement, which the federal government passed to ensure gender-based equality, started with a lawsuit about differences in the way collegiate athletes were supported, and women's teams and men's teams were both created and funded. At a higher level, we need to look to what we can do as a society around these issues. And unfortunately, this isn't a political statement. I don't make political statements. This is just a fact. Unfortunately, the U.S. lags behind virtually every developed country in the world in issues of family leave, in issues of paid child care, in paid maternity pregnancy leave, as well as child care leave after the baby's born. We have among the highest, if not the highest, rates of gender-based violence in the world. Women are disproportionately make up the number of people who live in poverty. The highest group of people living in poverty are women and their children. And women often face employment discrimination. We need laws and practices to support all of us being able to do these things. We need to have paid, in my opinion, we need to have paid paternity leave. Fathers should be involved with their babies. It's important. But because of gender stereotypes and other issues, even when specific employers have paternity benefits, men don't use them all. They may use some of them, but they don't want to be seen as taking all of it. When my son's second child was born, my youngest grandchild, my son's a high school principal, I asked him how much time he was going to take off. And he said he was going to take off a week and stay home with the baby and his wife. And I asked him how much time he was entitled to. He was relatively new in his job. He had just recently gotten promoted. And he was entitled to much more of that, but much more time. But he was very uncomfortable taking that off because he didn't know how his superiors would respond to that. Women and men shouldn't be under the pressure to have to make that choice. We should be able to have our careers, and if we choose to have our families. And people need laws to help them get to that point. I'm going to really wind up now. I'm not going to go through these. But these are just examples of the way in which gender disparities exist, the ways in which discrimination exists around the world. We can do better. We need to do better. So I'm going to skip these. They're very important, so I hate to skip them, but I have to. It's important to know that men are impacted by gender also, in different ways, but definitely impacted. When you talk about gender, if I ask a young man about gender, they often think that it's just a women's issue. But gender impacts everybody, of every gender. So what can you do? There are organizations on campus that you can become a part of. There are classes you can take. There are departments that you can take courses in and minor in or major in. You can attend some of the lectures that we sponsor where we bring incredible people in to talk about gender and how gender has impacted their lives. All of you will be at the first year author lecture this year, which is, I can't tell you how excited I am to have Justice Sotomayor come to our campus on October 17th. It's like one of the coolest things that's happened. She will talk about gender because when you read that book, which you've all read already, see, I knew that would get a laugh. You will see how much she talks about how gender impacted her life, as well as her ethnicity, as well as other issues. So it's really important. Shh. One more minute. It's really important that you join this community at Stony Brook and be an engaged member of the community. Some of you heard me talk about that at orientation. But that we respect each other. We care about each other. We allow people to be their whole true selves. And if we see something going on that we don't like, we stand up. We let someone know. We support each other, even if we don't know the people. We're a part of the positive change that we want to see start here at Stony Brook. And I really thank you for your attention. You were a great group, and I look forward to seeing all of you tonight at the convocation and then throughout your 4 years here. Thank you.
All right, let's give Dr. Robbins one more round of applause. Thank you. Okay, as you may know, you'll be getting credit for going to all of this programming, and I want to make sure you guys were awesome. I know it was a little bit hot in here, and you guys a lot hot, but you were a great audience. So I want to make sure that you get credit for doing so well. So what we're going to do is we're going to exit out these doors by section. Please take out your ID because you'll be swiping out of this program, and then it's lunchtime. All right, so this is what we're going to do. Hold on, up. If you do not have your ID card, if you don't have your ID card, there is someone with a clipboard to write down your ID number. But we're going to start with this group right here. Exit this way, out these 3 doors. Hold on. We're going to exit orderly. It's like, hey, who wants to go to the park in my house? Me! Thank you. Oh. I talked about it. Yeah. All right, now we're going to have our friends in the middle. You guys can get in line. These 3 doors. There's 3 ways to exit. Okay, that's fine. Yep, there's going to be someone with a clipboard outside. So once you just get out, just say, "Where's the clipboard person?" Okay. Yep. I think she's wearing a red polo shirt. Yep. Okay, my friends at the top, we're going to have you start to come down, and you're going to go out the door at the bottom of the stairs. My friends over here, we're going to have you get in line in the first 2 doors. That way we'll get out as soon as possible. Do not exit that way. You will not get credit. Exit this way. This way. And you can make your way through the second door if you want. Those people over there, you guys can go this way if you want.